Joining us is Paul Power, Chief Executive of the Refugee Council of Australia. Paul, good to see you.
Good morning.
Well, what is your reaction?
Well, I'm interested to see that the government is saying that they've returned to the funding model under the Howard government. Well, in a sense they are, because our organisation's funding was cut in 2001 by a previous Immigration Minister after the community response to the Tampa incident and all that followed. And the government decided at that point that it no longer wished to fund an authentic voice of the community sector on refugee policy and cut our core funding at that stage. So that's quite accurate, I suppose. But yeah, we were quite surprised. We weren't sure, to be honest, whether or not the funding was going to be in the budget when we saw, the allocation of $140,000 for the coming financial year and the funding remaining in the forward estimates. We would have thought that reasonably that the government had gone through the budget carefully and decided that this funding would continue. But to have it withdrawn, less than 2 weeks later was a real surprise.
So what do you make of that timing, the fact that it has happened after the budget was released?
Well, I don't understand that. I would have thought that the government would actually go through its funding priorities in the budget in fine detail and work out exactly what it does want to fund and doesn't want to fund. But clearly that mustn't have happened in this case. And so it does look, petty and vindictive, and they're not the words, from our organisation. They're the words of some of the member organisations that we've talked to who are really rather astounded. I mean, because our organisation isn't one of those, sort of radical groups constantly storming the barricades. We're a very mainstream organisation formed 33 years ago by Major General Paul Cullen. Our 185 members are faith-based organisations, migrant resource centres, torture and trauma agencies, asylum seeker support agencies, Red Cross, Amnesty International. If the government doesn't actually see any value in giving a partial subsidy to the work of agencies such as that, in building bridges between the government and the non-government sector, then I think it says a lot about the Minister's attitude towards the non-government sector entirely.
Well, you're obviously not impressed with the Minister's attitude. How would you describe the relationship between your organisation and your members and the government?
Well, I mean, it's constantly changing, and it also varies very much from person to person. I mean, I've been involved in a discussion earlier this week, with a number of other people and a federal government minister and a parliamentary secretary on matters relating to post-arrival support for refugees who've resettled. It was a really fantastic, positive and open discussion. And I mean, we're having those sorts of dialogues all the time while we're also, critiquing aspects of the government's policy which our members don't support. For us, these political waves come and go. I mean, since our organisation was formed, there have been 7 changes of Prime Minister, 16 changes of Immigration Minister, 8 changes of Departmental Secretary. So we just keep going on regardless. At some points, the government sees some value in supporting the work that we're doing, at other times not. So we'll just find ways of keeping our work going.
OK, let's look at the effect then. If we're looking at something like $500,000 over 4 years, what effect will that have on your work?
Yeah, I mean, we don't have, we're a small organisation. I've got 3 full-time staff and 6 part-time staff working with me. And, we don't have a fundraising arm. But bit by bit we've managed to build up, in fact, more support through membership fees and donations than we get through government funding. So this year, we're receiving more than $250,000 as that form of income. So, with the shortfall that we were facing, which organisations like ours face every year, and the $140,000 removed, we need to find another $200,000 for the coming financial year. But I think there is sufficient outrage within the Australian community. I wouldn't be foolish enough to think that a majority of Australians, strongly support humane and common sense policies for refugees, but there are millions of people out there who are deeply, deeply disenchanted with both major parties and the way they've behaved in relation to asylum seeker policy. And I suppose our only hope is that we can get more support from that significant segment of the population and continue our work.
Do you see this as purely political? Is it a government rationale that essentially saying that they have stopped the boats, therefore there are less cases to deal with, and therefore organisations such as yourself no longer need this amount of money simply because that workload is no longer there?
No, well, I mean, Australia's refugee and humanitarian program involves, in fact, the larger part of it is the resettlement of refugees from other countries. It always has been, even at the times of the largest flow of asylum seekers coming into the country. We've always had more refugees come through resettlement than we've had through the asylum system in Australia. So, I mean, that work will continue as it has, throughout our organisation's 33-year life. And we will continue to do all of the constructive work in relation to resettlement that we're involved in all the time, and we'll continue to speak plainly about detention issues and asylum issues. So there's certainly no reduced workload for our network because there's still a program of 13,750 permanent refugee and humanitarian places happening year to year, and a couple of hundred organisations very actively engaged in all of that support.
Paul Power, Chief Executive of the Refugee Council, thanks very much.
Thank you.